So we're going through, you'll remember this too. I think day 2 of the assessment, when you came in and you're open-minded, you're like, okay, let's get this trainer to take me through some stuff, see where I have imbalances from his perspective. And we start to do this unilateral step up exercise where it's like, okay, yeah, I want you to do based on, this weight for your body weight, just do as many as you can on the left, and then we'll take a break and we'll go for the right. And I was aiming for usually people get 20 to 30 is pretty awesome. And we literally went over the session time because you did so many friggin' step ups. Your volume was your capacity was 15 times higher than I had projected it. So I didn't even leave enough space to do it. You did 200 step ups per side. And it was holy shit, right. And then during that time, I'm right, man, this is this really mentally tough guy that's done all this endurance stuff. Of course he can do hundreds of reps. Welcome to the show, Peter.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. I can definitely remember it well because I remember you had to stop me at 200 because I would have kept going till collapse, which would you can be kind of dumb about it too because I couldn't walk for the next few days after doing that. It was maybe be a little bit smarter about what you put your body through. But anyway, yeah, I was here's a challenge. I want to go for it.
Yeah, and graciously accepting it. What's your kind of athletic stint like lately? I know you were training for some runs. You were looking to dial in a 5K run.
Yeah,
last time we talked.
And I'm still trying to pursue that. I didn't hit my target last year. I actually when I planned to do my run, I scheduled it for September, and there wasn't a lot of races going on because of COVID. But I was just going to do a track 5K. And my goal was sub 18 minutes. And I didn't get to actually do it in September because I had a mountain bike crash and injured my quad badly. And so I didn't actually run it. But I don't think I was there anyway. I never tested it. I think I was probably 8:15, 18 or 18:15, 18:20 range. And so I realized I had some work to do still. And so that's my goal for this summer,
right?
Still that sub 18 minute 5K.
So you're at a 15 to 20 second performance increase. That's what you're looking at.
Yeah, which is pretty significant when you get down to those. As your time gets lower, then those incremental differences are that much harder, as I'm sure you can relate to with your kind of training. But I think I'm going to hit it this year. This early in the season, looking at my times and how I'm feeling, I feel like it's definitely achievable. So yeah.
How does that rank? I haven't looked into this, but how does that rank in terms of an international or national rank for a guy your age? That's got to be pretty high level, isn't it? Sub 18.
Yeah, I don't think that I'm 51. I don't think there are that many runners running that kind of time at my age for sure. Definitely, in a smaller kind of, locally kind of thing. But it's definitely there are some people doing it, and I think that I looked up the world record for 5K in my age range is, 14 something. So it's pretty fast, which is just, those guys are just in a completely. I'm not that kind of athlete. I'm a recreational athlete that is trying to get faster. I don't think I could have ever, even in my 20s, achieved that kind of time. So, but yeah. So it would win me a lot of races. That's even local races, even against any age group, that's going to put me on the podium or definitely top 10 for even in a race in Toronto, maybe. That's. Maybe not Toronto, but definitely Peterborough, and so yeah, it's a good time, but it's not, it's not world class.
Yeah, I just knew that's a tough distance too. The 5K, it's a mentally tough sort of duration to put yourself through. So I can relate to that mental sort of strain, we'll call it. So you had the quad injury. What else is going on for you? What's life been like?
Life has been good. So, kids are doing well, and so I've got, my oldest daughter, Kate. She's kind of following in my footsteps a little bit. She's joining the triathlon club here, and so kind of running her around to different practices and swimming lessons and her triathlon club. Also doing mountain bike. I'm coaching mountain biking with the kids here as well. So doing that in between work and doing my training. That's life.
Yeah, that's great, man.
Yeah,
Your guys' practice is going well. Any kind of new advancements or anything super new there?
Not really. It is going well. We're getting busier. So Ange and I, who's my wife, is also a chiropractor, as you mentioned, we share a space, and it's not a big space, and we're kind of growing, and so we're overlapping when we're there. We're there together a lot now, so that is presenting some, just some, nothing bad, but just challenges as far as we have to figure out how we're going to, keep getting busier.
Yeah, logistics, eh?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a good problem to have.
Exactly.
I want to jump into this. So one of the methods that is fairly unique to you is this torque method. Right. And I've gone in to see you quite a few times, and I was just explaining this to a friend of mine who was asking about chiropractor, and I said, Peter does this technique where I'm like, honestly, at first I didn't know what the fuck he was doing. I trusted him, but I was like, I don't know. He could have told me how it helps and what he's doing, and I still would have been like, I don't get how this helps. You're like sort of touching my back and moving my feet, and I feel better after. Can you talk a little bit about that to maybe like the layman, like kind of in layman's terms, and then maybe, build it up a little bit for people that are a little bit more into the science background?
Sure. So I started, I did traditional type of chiropractic style, traditional type style of chiropractic for a long time, where we did, manipulating the joints to hear the pop and that kind of thing, and great results with that. But I was looking for something different, because just with, as I was progressing in my career and just learning more about the body and how everything worked, it's really when you have areas of muscle tightness or a bone or a joint that's not moving and functioning properly, it's because your brain is telling your body to do that. When there's muscle, any muscle in your body requires the brain to send a signal down the spinal cord, out the nerve to actually activate that muscle. So it's really all about the nervous system. So when you have a joint that's not moving, functioning properly, that's stuck, it's actually your nervous system is telling your body to do that. So I was looking for something that was a little bit more neurologically based, that this made sense to me, as far as addressing what's actually happening. And so I went through, learned a couple of different techniques along the way, and I landed on this torque release. A friend of mine, Dr. Derek Porter, who's in Vancouver, this friend of mine recommended that I take this torque release course, and so I went to the course, and I was actually the person being demonstrated on, and I received an adjustment in the base of my skull, the occiput, and I got up off the table, and I'm just taking these huge, like my lung expansion was just, I couldn't believe it. And I've always had a little bit of exercise induced asthma. Like it really takes a bit, I need to warm up for 20, 30 minutes before my lungs actually start to open up. And anyway, so I just felt this huge expansion. It was the most powerful adjustment I'd ever received in my life. I'm like, oh my God, like this is what I'm going to do now.
Yeah.
And so really what it is it's called a tonal technique. And the reason why it's called a tonal technique is because it's not just looking segmentally at the body, like, two vertebrae that are misaligned. It's actually how your nervous system is, the tone of the nervous system, how it's firing everything in the body. So when you talked about looking at your feet, different areas of the misalignments in your spine can actually create an improper tension that causes the whole body to twist and compensate, and actually affects the muscles right down into your legs and your feet. And so when I'm looking at that, I'm having you turn your head, because that changes how your leg length shifts and how the amount of tension that's in your feet. And so we can use these body signals to determine exactly where the spinal cord is actually being affected, and address those areas to change the tone of the nervous system, which is controlling all the muscle activity, but not just the muscle activity. Your nervous system is controlling everything in your body. It's controlling all of your internal functions as well, your heart, your lungs, your digestive system. So when we change the tone of the nervous system, then we actually see changes in not just aches and pains and joint function, but actually how your body is functioning overall.
Right.
And so with the adjustments, because we can precisely locate where these are doing this testing, it doesn't take a lot of force to actually make a change, because I'm not trying to force the bone. So I use an instrument that gives a gentle stimulation to the vertebrae, but it's not so much about the vertebrae, it's actually stimulating the nervous system at that level. It's sending information to the brain that allows the brain to better perceive what's happening, so that the brain can send the right signals back out to the body to have everything function at its best level.
So I got to say, first off, for anyone listening to this, like I would strongly recommend going in to see you or Ange to do this, because I did it and it made a big difference in a way that I wasn't sure how it would affect me. And like, I loved the assessment because it was so nuanced. It was very gentle. It's very from my experience, it's very untraditional to what I knew about chiropractic or chiropractor and adjustments that I had gotten in the past from different chiropractors. So I think it's really, I think it could be essential actually in a lot of ways to get that assessment done and to get some treatments in that way. In your perspective, like it sounds like, you went after what we know to be as like the biggest regulator of how we function, how we live, and that is the nervous system, right?
That's right.
When you're talking about the specific, you mentioned when you're stimulating the nervous system, what is actually happening there? Like how is what you're doing stimulating the nervous system?
Yeah, and I can give you some information on it. We don't know actually absolutely everything about what's happening there, but what we understand is that all around your spine are small muscles that are supporting the spine, controlling, giving the spine stability, controlling motion of the spine. So the multifidi muscles, the tiny little muscles between the vertebrae, the suboccipital muscles, or the muscles right under the base of the skull. These tiny muscles have what are called like mechanoreceptors. They're little nerve receptors, and so they detect movement. They tell your brain when there's motion. They tell your brain where you are in space, like where everything is positioned. So I know where my hand is right now without looking at it, because nerves are telling my brain that it's there. So you have a high concentration of these receptors in those little muscles around the spine. So those muscles aren't as important for moving the body as they're more of a sensory organ. So when we stimulate those vertebrae, it's actually creating a quick impulse to those receptors, and so that kind of sends a blast of information to the brain. And so this instrument that I use is way faster than I can adjust with my hand. So it's sending this incredibly fast impulse that's calibrated to send the right kind of information to the brain that allows the brain to better perceive what's happening. And then once it receives that information, so it's kind of like when you have these areas of misalignment, one of the main things that's going on is that the brain isn't receiving good information.
Right.
So what's happening in the body. So there's all sorts of negative consequences of that, because if your brain isn't receiving accurate information, then it can't send accurate signals out to your body to have the body do the right things, whether that's muscle action or joint position, but also, as I said, internal organ function as well. So it's just about stimulating the brain to get that communication working better again.
Yeah, that makes sense. You know, a big thing that comes up in the fitness industry is these sort of sexy topics, and there's always these, I don't know, there's a lot of bull crap when you're scrolling through Instagram and different ways to, you know, get certain results and all this stuff. What I find interesting about this method that you do is it's not particularly sexy. Like, you have some pretty cool looking gear, right? But it's really gentle, and you're still kind of like, I don't know what's happening. And like, it's really similar with certain breath work, right? Which is like another way that we can regulate nervous system. And I'd love to hear your opinions on some of the stuff too. But the stuff that seems to work the best and have the most profound effect seems to be the stuff that's a lot more subtle sometimes.
That's right. Is
that accurate? Like,
I definitely think, you know, one of the adages with the chiropractors that use this technique is less is more. You know, you don't want to be heavy with the adjustment. You just want to give these quick stimulations, but not heavy. So it's incredibly gentle. But yeah, it's not about forcing the bone. It's about stimulating that nervous system so that you're getting that proper communication happening. Yeah.
I'm curious, like, because this is such an effective strategy, it's obviously not the only strategy, right? People don't leave and then they're good, so to speak. There's certain maintenance. And what are some other strategies that you help people with in terms of regulation, or in terms of maintaining some of the change that you've just helped them make?
Yeah, that's a great question. And because I think that if you're not doing other things, you can still benefit from the care, but it's going to be limited, because the reason why you ended up in my office in the first place is because there was different stresses on your system that created some problems.
Yeah.
And if you're not, you know, addressing those, or at least trying to best deal with them, then you know, problems will come back, or you might have trouble with your problem resolving. So one of the biggest recommendations, one of the most common recommendations that I make is as you mentioned, breath work or meditation, because you know, I think that when I ask a lot of people if they're meditating, and most people tell me no, and I think they should be, because the research is pretty clear. It's like meditation is kind of like exercise. It benefits every single aspect of your physiology. Like it's pretty incredible. But one of the things it does is it helps calm down your nervous system. I think that most people are familiar with that, but calming down of your nervous system has really wide-ranging effects. Like, it's not just about feeling calmer, it's actually bringing your nervous system into a better state of balance so it performs better. So I'll introduce a couple of words here that some people might be familiar with, others not. Those that there's two sides of your autonomic nervous system, the autonomic being the kind of automatic part of your nervous system that's controlling all your internal processes, your breathing, your heart rate, your circulation, your digestion. So there's the sympathetic side of your nervous system, which is your fight or flight response, your stress response. Then there's the parasympathetic side, which is where healing and calming of your nervous system happens. It's called the rest and digest part of the nervous system. And so you really need to have those two sides in balance. And most people get stuck in that sympathetic side. So essentially, that when they're just in a resting state, so on the couch watching TV, their nervous system is actually jacked up in a fight or flight state, like they're being chased by a tiger. And because in modern society we have all this stress on us, and it's not just emotional stresses, it can be physical stress, chemical stress, emotional stress. Those different stresses accumulate, and so basically our nervous system is always on. So that part of the nervous system is great for when you're in a fight or flight situation, or if you're working out, you want your muscles to perform. So you're going to get a lot of circulation to your arms and your legs to be able to fight or flee, but your digestion shuts down, your immune system isn't as active, your healing and repair shuts down. So essentially, you're not, you have the stresses of the day. You want to be able to rest and recuperate from that. When you're sleeping at night, that's when most of the healing and repair happens. But our nervous systems are stuck in that stress state all the time. So we're not able to heal and repair properly. And so things start to break down over time. So we actually have testing in the office using heart rate variability, which is looking at the changes in the heart rate over time. That can actually demonstrate if you're stuck in that sympathetic or parasympathetic parts of the nervous system.
Let's talk about that. Yeah, go on about that a little bit more.
I'll get back to that, but I just wanted to finish with the meditation and kind of relate it back to torque release, because meditation helps bring better balance. It helps bring on that parasympathetic side, calm that sympathetic side, so you're in better balance. So your quality of sleep is going to be way better. I use it because one of the main reasons that motivates me to meditate or do breath work is because I want to perform in my sports. And I do it like often before interval night when I really want my body to perform, because it actually helps, bring relaxation to the muscles. My joints move better. So people who are having, musculoskeletal problems, meditation actually makes a huge difference to bringing that calming to your nervous system, because when that sympathetic side is jacked, then everything, your whole body is tense. You're kind of, and you're forward. It actually changes your posture into more of that kind of curled up into a ball state. The last thing I'll say about it is that that's one of the things that the technique that I use, the torque release chiropractic care, brings on that parasympathetic side. So it's actually creating a better balance in your nervous system. And that's why we test it, because that's probably, the greatest thing you can do is actually get these adjustments to help bring your nervous system into a more relaxed, balanced state. So people often report when they start care, which is often surprising to them, is that, okay, my energy is way up, my sleep is way better, I'm actually better able to handle stress. Like I can have the same level of stress in my life, but I'm actually able to handle it better now, because when you're in that fight or flight state, you're more in that reptilian brain, more reactive state. Anyway, so I said a lot there, but
oh, it's great. Like it's awesome. I'm going to jump in for a second too, because there's absolutely a trend. Like we're talking about the nervous system, and you're talking about, you're doing this calming thing because it affects not just feeling of calm, but it affects all of these other things. And in your situation, you're like, well, I know this is going to help me perform better tomorrow for 17 of these reasons. Right. And I think it can be important. Like the nervous, it's that we all have a nervous system, and we can all tap into it like quite simply and very like immediately. So, this type of testing you do is awesome. And as you're saying, like we need to keep doing other stuff too. It's not like you do this type of assessment and then you're good. It's like you still got to live your life. And there's ways that you can integrate your like nervous system regulation into other things that you're already doing anyway. So it doesn't necessarily need to be a big like add-on, like, now I'm doing my nervous system regulation techniques. It can be like, so like common things that come up with clients of mine are, they want to get more mobile. It's like, okay, well, we can go through, common mobility practices and focus on breath work to address your nervous system so that you get better result from the mobility exercises. Or we can focus just on breath work. And that's kind of what you're saying too. It's going to calm you down more. It's going to get your body into a more relaxed state so that you don't guard in the same kind of way. So I feel like in a lot of the things that I talk about, my kind of like variation of not a variation, my method of understanding nervous system would be through the CO2 tolerance test, right? Which we did when we were training a bit. And I found that not something I created, it's something that I learned in a course, but I have found that is also a really good correlation. And it's the same thing. It's just another way to kind of gauge where your nervous system is operating, because you can't outdo your nervous system. Like you can't outrun it. You can't out breathe it. You can't, like, it's the center. I don't know. It's kind of like what we are, right?
Absolutely. You know, we in chiropractic, we have a saying is that you live your life through your nervous system, right? Because it's controlling absolutely every single system in your body, and everything you perceive is you know, through all your senses is through the nervous system.
That's key.
Yeah, it's key. But yeah, you know, I think that you're right about you know, doing the different things and, you know, working on mobility but there is a challenge with people because of the time. You know, I have a pretty regimented way of approaching these things, and I spend, you know, at least minimum of an hour every night doing my kind of nightly routine of foam rolling, stretching, breath work, and just because I value the result so much. But not everybody is willing to do that, to commit to that. But there are definitely some techniques that you can do in the short term. So one of the things that, you know, I was working on this morning, I was doing some rolling and so I do the rolling, but or stretching, I'm always incorporating breath into that. So I'll take, you know, a breath in 4 seconds and then a breath out for 8 seconds. And the reason why that's recommended is because when you're breathing the sympathetic, so a breath in, the sympathetic side, that stress side is actually stimulated a little bit, where when you're breathing out, the parasympathetic side is stimulated more. So you do the shorter breath in. It shouldn't be an aggressive breath in. It should be just a controlled breath in, and then a nice slow and controlled breath out. And that's can really help you feel calm. But you'll actually, when you're doing muscle work, you'll feel the muscles release more effectively when you're incorporating that breath work at the same time. So you can kind of double up on those things. Mm-hmm. Another technique that I use that I'm sure you're familiar with, Josh, is, you know, I learned this from Andrew Huberman, is the quick, like the double breath. So you do like 2 breaths stacked on top of each other. It's called physiological sigh, if anyone wants to look it up. And so that actually is, you know, according to Andrew Huberman, who's a neuroscientist, is the fastest way to bring your nervous system into a more balanced state. So he recommends that you do it in 2 or 3 breaths, but they compared doing those physiological sighs and actually doing 5 minutes of physiological sighs and comparing that to other types of breath work, like a box breath or that 4-8 breathing or meditation, and that doing those physiological sighs for 5 minutes beat everything else out as far as improvements in heart rate variability and that kind of thing. So if you can afford 5 minutes, then that's something that people can do to help. If they're feeling stressed, then it's a good habit to get into.
So that's kind of good to clean that up, because there's a lot of, like, breath work it's getting to be decently sexy, right? Like you take all these courses and stuff. I've learned a lot through some really educated people on breath work. So have you. But kind of fine tuning it, you're like, if you have a couple minutes, this tends to be the most sort of bang for your buck breath exercise. It's very simple to do. You don't need any tools or instruments or gear. It's free breathing is free. That's the great thing about it. That's really simple. That's good to know, because there's a lot of techniques you could do, but that is a good one.
Yeah, exactly. And that being said, you know, I like that technique, but I get the best result when I'm doing that plus other things, you know, doing the paced breathing, doing my meditation, that kind of thing as well.
Yeah. One thing that helped me understand this a little bit more, you talked about, you know, when you inhale, it stimulates your sympathetic state versus when you exhale, it's more your parasympathetic. And I sometimes it's just like numbers to me. It's a ratio. It's like, okay, 4 seconds, 8 seconds, then we're putting a bigger priority on parasympathetic, and that's where we need to go. Because as you're saying, and anyone in the health industry realizes that people generally sort of live in a sympathetic dominant state for most of their being, and it needs to be about balance or kind of give and take. So if you could just prioritize, even if it's just like coming back to the most simple way to implement regulation, it's like just notice your breathing. Even be a little bit more mindful of your breathing through today will probably have pretty huge effects on literally everything we're talking about. Then, you know, the more you get mindful, the more you're implementing breath work and maybe mobility or exercise, then you slowly start to get into the realm of like an hour at night that's dialed in of like breath work, mobility, stretching, and you know what the result's going to be because you put enough emphasis, you know what the result's going to be, and you care enough about that because you know how good you feel. And this is an interesting thing, and I know that you can relate to this because you see a lot of patients. It's like, it's interesting when I can speak on behalf of this too, it doesn't need to be general, when you don't realize that you feel shitty.
Yeah.
Like it's such a crazy thing. You get so used to, so pain, right? Pain too. Because a lot of people would come in. I came in to see you because I had this neck pain. And that was my main concern. And I had this neck pain for years, but I was aware of it. I tried to fix it, but I got so used to that I forgot what it felt like not to have it.
It builds up slowly, right? And so I see that all the time. And you know, when I'm in my running club and looking at the younger runners compared to the people that are my age and older, and just the mobility that people have, and you know, things can become less mobile, and people develop more problems, and you know, we get older. But I think you can really mitigate that by doing the right things. But yeah, you're right. I think because it builds up slowly most of the time, is that people don't realize that, like, if you have you wake up with an acute neck or something like that, then you realize the difference. But when it's kind of the slow progression of losing your mobility, then I think that's pretty easy for that to happen. And it happened to me. Like, all of a sudden I realized that, wow, I used to be able to, stand and put my hands flat on the floor with straight legs, and just like all of a sudden I realized, like, wow, I can't do that anymore. What's going on there? So I just really started to focus on it, and it's like, yeah, things can definitely get better.
Yeah. Let's jump into HRV a little bit. It's a gauge that you use in your own training, I know too, in your own well-being at your practice. What are you wearing for wearables, by the way? Are you tracking your HRV?
Yeah, I'm using my Polar watch. It does it reasonably well. I wore a Whoop strap for a year.
Right. Yeah.
And I loved it. And so the first thing I do every morning is come down and look at my stats. It was great. And but it was like $45 a month. And so after a while, I was like, it was diminishing returns. I felt like I had a good handle of what kind of habits really made things better in my health. So it was a useful tool for that year. But now this gives me enough information that it doesn't cost me anything besides the initial purchase of the watch. So I'm happy with just using that for now. But yeah, so I get a heart rate variability reading every morning. It tracks my sleep cycles, not very accurately, according to, I did a little bit of research, and
Yeah.
there's no wearable, none of the wearables are doing it great as far as, seeing it, how you are in that REM sleep, those deep sleep cycles. But it's giving me, relative to my other nights of sleep, where I'm at anyway, because I think they do that reasonably well. So long answer to your question. That's what I'm wearing.
Oh, it's good. Yeah. And then how do you feel, how do you utilize HRV? Like, would you use it? Do you use HRV with, general population that are coming in for a bit of pain? Like, do you talk to them about that? Or do you test HRV every time they're coming in, or how do you use it?
Not every time they're coming in, but we do it at the first visit, and then we do it at their progress exams, which are usually maybe every month or so. We're doing a re-exam, or after a certain number of visits, we'll do a re-exam to see how things have changed. So that's how we use it in the office, and we've been using heart rate variability in the office for a long time now. So it was through chiropractic that I actually heard about heart rate variability, because it wasn't as widely known like it is now. But there were some leaders in our profession who developed this technology, and so I've been working with it for years. And so it's, but then when the wearables started coming out, it was really great, because now you can get these daily readings, which are so helpful. So I recommend my patients, track it, and I tell them about Elite HRV is the app that I use, and so I recommend that to my patients frequently, to use that app. You have to have some sort of way of gathering the information. So I use my Polar H10 chest strap, because it's really accurate for collecting the information. So that's what I recommend for people on a daily basis, to be able to modify their habits using that technology. But we use it as a gauge in our office of actually looking at how are we doing as far as improving your physiology.
Right. Now, I'm sure this gets down to a specific example, but like with HRV, we're generally checking it every, for someone that's, we'll say the general athlete. So you and me, people that are training for something, we're checking it every day, right?
Yes.
Or we're getting a gauge every day. And there's several things that can affect our HRV versus increasing it or decreasing. Increasing it for folks that aren't sure of it, increase is better. The higher it is, the better it is. The more optimal your health is, your well-being, the better your performance is going to be. The lower, generally, the less you'll perform, and the less you're feeling good. So from checking it every day, is it still accurate if you're checking every month? Like if someone comes in and the night before, like we know some of the parameters around lower HRV are like, alcohol, poor sleep, major stress, maybe they did a crazy volume of training, like all of these things can affect that. Like, how do you go about that in order to keep it accurate enough to be like things are going well or things are not going well?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it seems with the technology that we have at the office, it doesn't fluctuate. The algorithm that technology uses, it doesn't fluctuate as much as your nightly readings. That just look at that RMSSD number, which is what most of the wearables have used. So when we look at the heart rate variability, it plots on a graph of where your heart rate variability is, and it's actually, if you're not changing anything, it's pretty stable, and it doesn't vary very much. So if it has swung in an unexpected way, then I'll ask the person, like, what's happening. Did you have a workout this morning, like just before you came in, or something like that? But no, it only it changes slowly over time with that technology, so we can kind of, I think it's a good gauge. That sounds super reasonable. How important do you think it is to check it every day and to adjust things based on that? Like if you're saying it's a decently slow change, does it really matter if we track it daily? You know, that's a good question. According to, you know, when I listen to the guys from Whoop on their podcast, and
Yeah.
they feel it really gives you a sense of what your body's able to do that day as far as performance, or it can give you an indication. But really, it's a measure of how much strain you've put on your body. And I definitely see that with the daily measurement. Like if I, you know, the morning after I do my running intervals, it's always lower. So, which makes sense. You know, I've depleted my body, which I want to do with that workout. And it's going to take me a couple of days to fully recover from that. So I think it is a useful tool in looking at how well has your body recovered. And, you know, am I ready to go? I don't think it's perfect, but I think it is a useful tool for sure. But, you know, it can vary, you know, day to day, just based on, it's not just your training, because it's also your stress level. That can really, like if you have a lot of emotional stress, like and you have some sort of test coming up or something like that, or you're having relationship problems, like your heart rate variability will definitely go down. So it's not just that physical stress or training that's going to have an effect on it, but those kinds of stresses are going to affect your performance. So you have to look at everything in this totality to how it's affecting your performance and how much stress you can put your body through.
Yeah, good call. I've been having a lot of conversations about this because I got this Aura ring. This is the new Aura ring, right? And it's supposed to be, well, I heard, who knows, but it's supposed to be the most accurate, but still not. Wearables are not 100% accurate. We know that.
Right.
But even if, like, this is a thing that I'm coming up against, because people will say, hey, how do you like your ring? And I'm like, well, you know, I know what it does. So it's fine. But I'm just thinking, I'm like, do I recommend something like this to someone? Because it's like, it gives you the data. And this is something that Andy Galpin said in one of the podcasts too. It's like, you know, I don't know that there's technology available for, the population of like non-scientists to actually, for it to be helpful. It's like, so, okay, so we get all this data, now what? So it's like, okay, so I'm tracking my HRV. Well, how do I make that, you know, a couple points higher? Or like, you know what I mean? Like I get resting heart rate variability, body temperature, respiration rate, gives me my HRV balance, my recovery index, my sleep balance, previous day activity. Like there's a decent amount of shit to look at there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the more complex it gets, the more I tend to get back to simple, like less is more, as you said too, in the chiropractic world. So I guess I'm kind of giving advice to people that are maybe not sure of this. And it's like, there's also a really good strategy to checking in with yourself, and it's called mindfulness.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I know you'll speak positively on that, because that's also basically meditation and breath work. It's all the same shit. It's like just tuning into your body and not letting something external tell you how you feel. It's like developing some more intuition and ability to check in with yourself. So that's kind of my opinion of wearables right now. It's like, I think they're great. They're cool. It's something to talk about. It does give me some good info. And then I'm also like, you know, it's pretty cool just to ask yourself how you feel sometimes too, if you have the discipline to do so.
Yeah. And I think that, I think you're really talking about the limitations of the technology and also some of the problems with it. Because I think for some personalities, it's actually stressful to actually look at it and have, if you're getting a negative number and it could actually make things worse. Or if you actually are expected to perform that day and you look at your reading and it's a bad reading, then psychologically that's not going to be beneficial. Because if you just, as you say, just check in, it's like, yeah, I feel good, I feel ready to go, then that confidence is going to help you perform better. Versus if you actually look, it's like, oh, I'm in the red, I've got a really bad reading today, I'm not ready to go, then
right,
that's a problem. For me, it's just been kind of fun. I look at it because I like actually trying to get my numbers up as high as possible. And the habits that I've developed have been influenced by using the technology. You know, I do that hour to hour and a half nightly routine because I see it affect my numbers and affect my numbers, but also affect how I feel. So it correlates.
Yeah, of course.
And, so yeah, I like it. I like it, but it's not for everybody.
Yeah, that's fair. And even the mindfulness thing, there's an example where that's not necessarily, you know, doesn't necessarily trump that. For instance, and you know this feeling from training so long, you wake up in the morning, if you don't feel very good, if that was the only indicator of like what you're going to do or if you're going to train that day, that would be a pretty piss poor indicator, because you and I both know the amount of times you allow discipline to be like, okay, so I don't feel very good, but I'm still going to train, or I'm going to start to train and see how I feel. The amount of times you start training and then you get through it and you're like, oh, that was so much better. I'm glad I did that. Like that happens almost every time. So yeah, even the fact that I'm saying, you know, being mindfulness is great, or being mindful is great. There's a certain sort of intersectionality between like the technology that's out here now that's accessible, and whilst still developing some like mindfulness and self-awareness, probably both pretty helpful. And, you know, you just sort of pick where you want to be on the spectrum.
Yeah.
That's my thought. What do you think? Does that sound pretty good?
Yeah, I agree.
I want to talk to you about, or hear from you about how you have two kids. You guys are super, you know, tuned into nervous system regulation and development. How do you feel that's affected your kids? Like from yours and Ange's understanding of how humans regulate, how has that affected how you parent? Big question.
Yeah, that is a big question. And you know, I think it's always present in our minds. You know, certainly, you know, we're not perfect parents, but as I don't think anyone is, but yeah, no, it's definitely something that we're conscious of. Yeah, you know, one of the things that that you know our kids have the benefit of getting, like they get chiropractic adjustments every single week, which helps, you know, bring them into a better nervous system state, and we often base when those adjustments happen when we see problems with emotional regulation. So you know, if someone is you know, getting upset more easily, and it's like, oh yeah, you really need an adjustment. Let's get you checked.
Right.
So that's definitely a big factor. But Ange has done a ton of work with just looking at different ways of parenting, and she's taught me through her readings and the courses that she has taken. So yeah, we're just always conscious of you know, just trying to keep things, just not shame our kids, and just, you know, for example, we don't do timeouts, because something that she has learned is that just that separation from everybody is something that's stressful to the nervous system. So it can actually magnify the behavior that you're actually trying to correct.
Right.
Those kinds of things.
Yeah, I know this could be absolutely a whole episode on just like tactics for helping kids with regulation, for sure. Probably more than an hour. There's thousands of techniques for that.
Yeah, and Ange would be the person to do the podcast with, because that's kind of her area of expertise and focus is working with the pediatric population, and she's just done so much learning with respect to that, and she works with a lot of kids with you know, ADHD and those kinds of problems, because just that nervous system regulation just can make such a huge difference.
Yeah, you know what? Obviously, the theme is nervous system regulation, and even when you bring up ADHD, I heard this in an interesting way. ADHD, like, you know, attention deficit hyperactive disorder, but I think what I heard it referred to as is a lack of being seen, like a lack of connection, right? So, you know, what's the combat? It's like reaching out more, like that kid is trying to get your attention even more, so they're hyperactive about it. And it's sort of the how I understood it was kind of the same as what you just said about like timeouts. It's like, you know, your kid's acting up, so you give them a timeout and it magnifies that. It's like, you know, your kid might need you, but they're not necessarily able to, maybe they don't have the regulation or the skill set to say, hey, I need you for this connection. They might be yelling or swearing or trying to get your attention in some other way. Whereas it can kind of magnify the problem if we don't address that it might be about connection or a lack of connection.
Yeah.
I don't know. I have a 2-year-old, so it's not quite the same right now, but in a lot of the same ways, it's about these same types of themes, just at a more like preliminary kind of way, right? Because he's so underdeveloped in his brain right now. Not underdeveloped, just he's 2.
Yeah, exactly. He's
early stages of development.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. I can't put too much pressure on him. He's only 2.
Exactly. And that's something Angela always has to remind me of, like, because sometimes, you know, I would expect my oldest daughter to kind of have the rational behavior that an adult would have. And it's an unrealistic expectation. So.
Yeah, that's fair. You talked about your kids getting into sports, your oldest daughter kind of following in your footsteps with the triathlon and stuff. Those are big shoes to follow, but clearly it's a good influence to have, being active with your kids in that. How do you think sport plays a role in kids' lives, for the good, the bad? How do you think it can affect kids?
Oh, yeah, I can speak personally, like, I need to be active to actually feel good in my head. You know, I need some sort of activity almost every day to actually feel you know, good energy, and you know, that it helps bring that emotional regulation for me. Like, it helps my nervous system. So I think that being active for people, I think it helps the brain perform better. So I think there's that aspect of it. You know, we know that exercise is, you know, just helps you be healthier. And then there's all the social things that go along with, you know, participating in sports, the relationships that are developed through sport. I think that, you know, it can develop good discipline. And just, you know, focusing on goals and that kind of thing. But, you know, at this stage for Kate, I don't want her to have like too much pressure on herself. I just want her to have fun. And I think that's what it's all about, is just kind of discovering what you like, and pursuing your, you know, lots of different things that you can figure out what you like.
Totally.
Yeah.
Do you see there being any downfalls to your kids being in sports?
I'd say the one downfall for our family is because Ange and I, you know, like for me especially, you know, and Ange too, that's been a big focus in my life. Like, I've always participated in sports, and more than music or drama or other kinds of things. That's been just what I am passionate about. And Kate, my oldest, and Ella too, she's not, like, because she's younger, she hasn't got into the different organized sports as much, but, you know, she has lots of talents, and I want her to discover all those different things. So I think that we can, you know, kind of tend to push the athletics, because that's what our bias is. But So we have to keep that in mind.
So you see a downfall as more like our projection that we might have onto our kids if we see a certain importance with sport.
Yeah, and because that's a really good way of putting it too, is because I try not to put any pressure on my kids, but you know, I'm a coach of, you know, I coach cross country skiing and I coach mountain biking, and so with Kate, when I'm trying to, you know, I see her performing a certain sport, and I try and coach her, and she'll say, like she'll shut me down, and I'm like, you know, I say, yeah, okay, you just do it, like just have fun, because she doesn't want to be instructed all the time on how to get better. She just wants to have fun with it. So I have to be very careful of you know, not putting pressure on her to you know, go to the Olympics or get a scholarship or something like that, which you know, if she does that, great, but certainly don't want that pressure to be there.
One thing I've learned recently is it's from a book called Psycho-Cybernetics. Have you ever heard of it?
No, I haven't.
It's this book from a plastic surgeon that wrote a book on self-image. It's really interesting. Anyway, one of the takeaways, one of the hundreds of takeaways, is that we learn from experience, not from people telling us, right? So it's kind of fascinating to bring that in, because, you know, you're in a field of helping people manually, like, or verbally, like, you know, you're a pretty holistic chiropractor. I think you'd classify yourself as that, I'm sure. It's a pretty well-rounded approach. And I'm pretty well-rounded too. But it's so interesting when, like, you and I both know, sometimes some people, or sometimes even maybe you and me as individuals, we just want to try it and see what happens. Like, there's just the whole, let me do it and see what happens. There's that whole like experience side of it versus like knowing or being coached on it first, or being told what the outcome is going to be, or being told how to do it. I don't even know where I'm getting at with this point, but it's just kind of it's an interesting quality about humans where we just need to experience things sometimes. And whether it's sport, or whether it's people in our lives dying, or it's grief, or it's fucking anger, or it's injury, or like whatever, like we won't know how to build, we won't be able to be resilient unless we go through that stuff. I don't know. It's a big thought.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I think when you first started talking about it, I was thinking about it through sports and how I learn. I think that's probably accurate. That I like to just, you know, show me once, or you know, tell me what to do, and then let me do it. Yeah. And then I'll learn. Okay, and then get feedback from that, and then I'll often go and you know, let's say I've recently started playing tennis again after a couple of decades of not playing, because I played a ton as a kid, so I played at an okay level, but you know, I'm completely rusty. So I go out there, and then I go and I watch some videos on how to do it better, and kind of process that overnight and try again. But yeah, that it's interesting. Yeah, I haven't heard that concept before, but I'm gonna keep that in mind.
Yeah, well, and it's, you know, I'm not even telling you, I'm like, you know, I have my own life, and then I'm helping raise Sorrel, obviously, and I have clients in that. You know, you and I are in similar responsibilities for how we help people and who we're interacting with. But yeah, it's really interesting. Like for me, when I read that, I'm like, just to almost be there when someone is experiencing something is sometimes enough. Like I don't have to help the person.
Right. Okay.
Which is difficult when it might mean like your kid, you know, kid might need to get hurt here a little bit in order for them to learn, versus you telling them they're going to get hurt. Like that's a sharp knife. I'm not going to let you juggle knives when you're 2, but eventually you're going to have to learn that the knife is sharp, so that you in your nervous system can pattern that, right, that knife is sharp and this is what it feels like, versus.
Yeah, sorry, I wasn't understanding what you were getting at totally, there. So yeah, I have a better concept now of what you're talking about, and yeah, that totally makes sense. You know, I have a friend who has a you know, we have a trampoline in the backyard, and we've got, you know, it's one of the modern ones with the netting all around, and so the kids aren't going to bounce out of it. So my friend has a trampoline with no netting, and we go down there to have the kids jump, and we're, you know, Ange and I are just terrified the whole time. But his philosophy is like, well, they're going to learn how to be safe on the trampoline, because there's no protection there. So it's kind of that, you know, not being a helicopter parent, you know, not having them do anything crazy, but have them learn from experience. Yeah.
It's interesting, eh? It's like, it makes you sort of be like, shit, okay.
Yeah, and I'm way more relaxed with that kind of stuff than Ange. Like Ange is more protective for sure, but I'm a little bit more of that philosophy. It was like, yeah, they just let them do it; they'll be fine, and figure it out.
Yeah, it's a tough concept to get around too. For me, like having a toddler, it's like I don't want him to get hurt, but like he will have to learn to get hurt a little bit, and I don't know. So far, he's great, and things are going well, and parenting is pretty challenging overall. It's really rewarding, but it's definitely the most challenging thing I've done. Like a constant, you don't know how well you're doing constantly. You kind of never know if you're doing better. I don't know.
Yeah, no. I had this vision that I was going to be this you know, kind of perfect parent, but once I was, especially after my second one was born, I'm like, no, I'm making tons of mistakes, and my kids are going to come back to me years from now and tell me where I screwed up. But it's like, that's life.
Yeah. Good way to sort of own that too, right? Like, we're human, mistakes are part of it. I'm going to try, and it's the way it goes. Even whether that's sport or whatever, right? We're going to make mistakes. Peter, I really appreciate you jumping on, man. I know we jumped around in a lot of topics, but you know, partly because we know each other, and I knew you had a lot of expertise in quite a few different fields and in areas. So I'm really grateful to pick your brain on these things, and thanks for your time on here.
Yeah, it was great to chat with you, and great to see you again, Josh.